Drop and Give Me 20 is brought to you by Germono Advertising Company. Drop and Give Me 20 is the podcast for military entrepreneurs. Each episode is around 20 minutes long, giving entrepreneurs a glimpse into the life of other successful military entrepreneurs, learning from their obstacles and gaining insight and inspiration. Podcast episodes focus on the stories, challenges, and wins military entrepreneurs have faced in their businesses. I am your host, Lindsay Germono, and thank you for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Drop and Give Me 20. I am your hostess with the mostest, Lindsay Germono, and I am here with someone who I've actually wanted to get on the podcast for a long time, and just the stars aligned this season. We are well into season 6, but this is an episode that probably should have been recorded episode 1 or 2 in the Drop and Give Me 20 military entrepreneurship realm. Without further ado, Andy Nelson. Andy, do you like to be called Andy or Andrew? Andrew seems so formal.
Yeah, it does. Andy's great. Okay. I've always been that.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So your background, as far as military goes, you were in the Army.
Yes, that's right.
Jumping out of airplanes.
I did. Yeah, I did that. I got my, post high school 3 years of adventure. That's kind of that's what I did. And I was in and then I was out.
And when you were in, did you know you wanted to be a lawyer?
No, part of the reason I went into the Army is I didn't know what I wanted to do at all. So college-wise, so I kind of developed at least my interests, college-wise in the Army, but I had no thoughts of being a lawyer at that point. I had nobody in the family do that, nothing even close. That didn't develop until, halfway through college.
Fun fact about myself, because I'm narcissistic in this moment. I wanted to be a lawyer when I grew up. I did. I wanted to be a lawyer. I did. I don't know why. I always thought, when people ask you as a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always said lawyer. I have no idea why. Anywho, for our listeners, Andy has been in the military community for quite some time, and that's where I actually ran into him. I'm reading the bio from his website, fortislaw.com. Andy represents clients in complex business, commercial, intellectual property matters. And I'm just going to go get down to the bottom of it. But one of the things that I really think is interesting about this is your focus and passion for military entrepreneurs. So tell us a little bit about that and what your focuses are currently, as our listeners tend to be active duty military business owners, which is a whole different ball game. And then military spouse. And then we also have veteran entrepreneurs listening to this as well.
Sure. Yeah, I got out of the Army in 1994, and it was really, I separated from the military. Back then there was, cell phones were kind of new still. There was something called an internet, but it was still, there was email and that sort of thing, but it was pretty, it's not what it was. It wasn't then what it is now. So I really did separate from, the Army, the military life, that sort of thing, got into college. It was literally probably not until 2010 or 11 when all of a sudden all my old platoon mates and et cetera, we kind of found each other on Facebook, formed our own group. We had a reunion. We've had one ever since. And I kind of realized, this is part of my identity. I mean, I always thought about it, on a daily basis, but it just wasn't a focus of mine. And somewhere around that same time, I've been practicing for about 10 years, and I kind of realized, some of my clients happen to be military entrepreneurs I ran into by hook or crook, don't know how. And I kind of thought to myself, I don't know why, I can't explain it, but I get along better with these people. This is a customer service business, so to speak, and it's a very much a relationship business. And I just realized that I just enjoyed my relationships with military, community entrepreneurs. And then I started to focus that way, not entirely, but I did start to kind of press myself that way, networking, meeting more and finding all these diverse businesses. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So that's the way it came about.
So, I'm in a number of Facebook groups that are military oriented, and when people have legal questions as it pertains to copyrights and trademarks, you tend to get tagged in those, whether or not you see those or not. So I love to see that, because it's something that so the beauty of social media is you get tagged in things you might not even know it because you might not be in that group.
True.
But you must do well enough that people recommend you and recommend your work.
It's flattering. I mean, it's heartwarming. I guess is what it
Yeah.
is.
They could say otherwise, you know that. They could be like,
Yeah,
"Don't hire him."
yeah, that may happen. You don't know, but I mean, I suppose I would know. But it's great. Yeah, it's really heartwarming to see that. I feel like I'm doing good.
Yeah.
I guess.
All right. So this is my really crappy way of trying to do homework and also not having any background in legal training or anything. So I was looking at kind of what I wanted to talk about, especially with our listeners. We start talking about the beginning part of your business and how you kind of just like get into it and you go. And then sometimes what happens is you get a slap on the wrist because you may have been using something that you didn't
Yeah.
have clearance to use, or you end up seeing somebody trying to use your likeness and then you're like, oh crap, I didn't, go through the registration or the trademark process to protect my brand. So I have I have something I'm going to try and like when I recap this, and you need to tell me if I have it right or if I
Okay.
have it wrong. So trademarks are your brand, copyrights are your content.
There's some truth to that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What the trademarks symbolize or a kind of a symbol of your brand, right? So you make a brand connection when you see or experience something distinctive. So yes, that's true. And then yes, copyright protects expressive content of all types, from literary to audiovisual, uh, photographic, sculptural, visual art, that sort of thing. That's what. So there's a tiny amount of crossover when you have, say, a trademark that happens to be a logo that happens to have enough visual distinctive content that may also be covered by copyright as a piece of visual art. But that's kind of really the one intersection that you see.
Okay. All right. So as it pertains to our listeners, what do you want people to do first? Do you want them to go down a trademark realm or a copyright? Or does it make sense just to have a conversation with you and you figure it out for them? So like, what's that process look like? And what would you recommend to folks who are getting ready to start their business or maybe in the very early stages so that they don't get a cease and desist later, for something that they had no idea that they were doing incorrectly?
Yeah, it's very wise early on. Any business is going to have some kind of marker or commercial identity. So there's going to be a trademark, maybe more than one. Nike has at least three popular ones, right? Nike, the swoosh, and of course, Just Do It, and more. So you've got a logo, you've got a slogan, you've got words. I mean, all kinds of things. So any business that makes sense right away when you're developing the ideas, you're going to be called something, and it just may be, Andy's Boutique or something like that. I mean, that's a simpler one, but if it's something more distinctive, different kinds of words, you want to make sure that you're okay to use it, that you're clear to use it, because yes, investing the time and developing, falling in love with an idea, adopting it, spending money on marketing, etc. Doing that only to get a cease and desist letter 2 weeks later, sometimes years later, after you've gone down a path, that can be an expensive, disruptive change. So you really want to, out of the gate, make sure that your identity is clear to use, or relatively clear. You're never going to be 100% sure, but you can be pretty doggone close to doing that. And then, aside from trademarks itself, just understanding what you think you create, that you're laying claim to. You may not understand it legal, and there may not be any right to something, but at least saying, okay, here's the intangible things that I think that are mine, that I've created, that I've developed, and just inventory them, write them down. Then, yeah, you need to get a better understanding of whether there's really something there, whether it's doing a little bit of your own work on the web to kind of educate yourself more about how these things fall into different columns, or talking with an attorney who could probably cut through that a lot quicker and say, this goes in that bucket, that goes in that bucket. Here's the best strategy. Here's the best strategy here, and this one, there's nothing there. So there's nothing to do. Just understand that there's just not going to be any protection for this particular thing. Then you can kind of just something you revisit every once in a while as a business owner, because you develop new things, you use new things, and sometimes you discard things. They're not worth
Yeah.
protecting anymore, caring about. That happens all the time.
Yeah, totally. So when I was registering the podcast, Dropping Give Me 20, what I found interesting in that process was you can have Drop and Give Me 20, but it's the manner in what you're using it for. So like Drop and Give Me 20 podcast for military entrepreneurs is different, obviously, than Drop and Give Me 20 push-ups because you're in the fitness realm.
Exactly. Yeah. The trademarks are really, no one should ever have the idea that if I come up with some concept for a name or a logo, what have you, that once I use it, I own it for everything under the sun. So if I decide to, manufacture tires later or something like that, I already have the path cleared. Trademarks are by definition kind of limited in geographic scope, but also kind of subject matter scope. What are they? What does it identify you for? What, the brand behind it? It has to have
Mhm.
that identity, that connection to function as a trademark. So that's why you have Delta being owned by at least three giant companies and probably several more as well that you don't know about, just because they own Delta for different goods or services.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, there's like the kitchen and bathroom fixture part
Yep.
of that there's that Delta, and then there's the airplane one. There's probably 100 different other
And
ones.
there's Delta Dental, and
Oh
so
yeah, Delta Dental.
yeah. So,
Right,
the point is, no consumer is going to be confused about the
right.
brand, the goods or services tied to that word, even though it's the same exact word. It's a different source, and if it's a different source, there's no trademark infringement. Different trademarks being owned by different people.
And so, period, next paragraph, transition. Can you assist folks that are anywhere, or do you have to stay in California, businesses that are in California, because that's where you're able to practice, the state that you're clear to practice from?
It depends on what the work is. When it comes to intellectual property work, I really can help people anywhere, because the layer of law that really governs that is, it's at the federal level for the most part, not the individual states. So there's no peculiar state aspect really to those sorts of the counseling, the decisions to be made. There are differences to be sure, but it's really kind of a national practice. However, somebody asked me to help them with some kind of local, dispute, property dispute, with the tax assessor or what have you in Georgia. Well, yeah, that's not going to be me. That's going to be somebody certainly local who knows that and may have to appear in court, and you certainly need to be licensed there to do that.
So, when you're working with military entrepreneurs, do you see any differences between what their concerns are versus a civilian entrepreneur? I may just be pushing that, and there might not be a difference, but I'm just curious. For our listeners, a lot of the military spouses, especially, are geographically kind of more fluid
Yeah.
than a veteran-owned business who might have that PO box and that address established.
Yeah, you just kind of hit on what the one added concern that I see with military businesses as opposed to civilian is that one question. Looking ahead, I'm living here now, or I'm residing here now, but this is where I'm going to be. So there's that discussion as well. That's it. Otherwise, the concerns are largely the same. Largely the same. How do I protect myself? How do I know I own something? How do I enforce it? And just as a business owner in general, how do I protect myself from the worst? How do I set myself up in a position where I insulate my personal assets, that sort of thing?
Excellent, excellent. So we have 20 minutes of this episode of podcast is just crazy ridiculous and it flies by.
Mhm.
But for those that are listening, where would you want them to connect with you? Do you prefer LinkedIn? Do you prefer, your old fashioned email? What is that preferred method of reaching out to you
Yeah,
look
uh,
like?
it happens all different ways. So I don't know if I have a preference. Email's great. Email is certainly a great way, and I regularly look in my spam folder too to see if an unexpected email that floats in there, so I don't miss anything, at least that I know of, by email. That's a good way to get a hold of me. Or if not,
Awesome.
all the messengers on all the platforms, they punch me in the face, so I get the messages. I don't miss them.
So I'm connected to a couple lawyers, and I would say that you are one of the most uh, present on social media platforms. And I really appreciate that about you because people tend to scope things out on social media before they go and give you a call or send you an email. So I really like that. From the marketer in me, I appreciate that. Um,
It took a lot of pushing. It's not natural to me.
I know, and
So
it's not fun. Sometimes you just want to be off work
yeah.
and spend time with your kids and be with your family and not have to worry about answering messages. But and it's weird too because I almost feel like people message me about marketing and they'll have a question and I'm like, I need to know so much more
Mhm.
about what you're asking me than just responding to a yes or no or something. So it's almost like the a thorn in our side at times, though.
Right.
What was your hardest law school exam question?
Oh boy. So I have to remember something from 21 plus years ago.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, geez. Okay.
I know, and I love to do this.
Ah,
I love to throw people off, and they're not even like ready for it. That's love.
I cannot even remember the fact patterns to tell you the truth. If any, a lot of people, most people probably do not know what a law school exam looks like. It's usually, it's typically, people can switch it up. It's typically some kind of paragraph. It's usually going to be a paragraph, just some kind of fact scenario. And,
Mhm.
and there's every little fact in there is probably in there for a reason. Every little adjective is in there for a reason, and then usually there's some kind of question at the end because there might be a fact pattern and it might say, what is this person, what are their options, or, advocate against them, or, you don't know what the task is going to be. Boy, I can't remember any one particular question. I really cannot do it. The subject that probably gave me the most trouble is probably constitutional law. That's
Mm,
just a thick, deep subject. I mean, on the surface, we get the Supreme Court news, and that's almost always constitutional law. And so we can, of course, analyze it superficially. Oh, this is easy, and this is how I feel about it. But it is a deep, 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 thick subject.
yeah, you start peeling back those pages, and you're like, "Holy crap!" Like, maybe I
And I
feel
don't
this.
do that now. No, no con law
Yeah,
here. I just kind
yeah.
of know it and I remember it. But not practicing it. Not going to be appearing before the Supreme Court anytime soon.
If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing professionally?
Professionally, okay. Well, I don't know
Yeah,
what I
professionally,
would.
I need to say that. Not spending time on the golf course.
Okay. Uh, if I wasn't doing what I was doing, and I have no idea if I could make a living off this these days, but I would love to own a bookstore. I always enjoyed books. Years ago when there used to be something called Borders Books,
Yeah.
that was my Saturday morning kind of routine. To get up and just get a coffee in there and walk the aisles. Look at books. Look at back then DVDs. Let's
Yeah,
see.
yeah,
I just enjoyed that, So I always thought it'd be great to actually own one of these. Not that I have any idea if that's a good idea
yeah.
or not, but it draws me.
Do you read non-legal? I mean, like, I'm assuming you read a lot of legal publications, but what is your favorite genre outside of that to read?
Uh, Probably historical nonfiction. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Historical fiction. Historical fiction. I don't think I've read anything recently, but I was on a tear for a while where I really like that. I really like that stuff. When it's well written historical fiction is fun. You kind of know the history, but not, it's not a history book.
Yeah.
There's something else, some other twist in there, but it's not too fanciful. If it's too fanciful and nutty, then I go, roll my eyes. But I like that genre.
I freaked out when I watched Hamilton on, I guess it came out on Disney Plus or
Disney
whatever. I
Plus,
watched.
yeah.
Yeah, I watched over the holidays, and I was like, blown away. Historical fiction is not my. I like the thrillers, keep you up at night. Afraid to put it down. Don't want to read it when you're alone in the house, type of stuff. It's just
Mhm.
scary things.
Yeah.
But I loved that, and I loved that what that did for for everybody wanting to figure out. Well, now I think I am interested in history.
Yeah,
Um,
Bernard Cornwell, I think it is probably my favorite author. And if anybody knows The Last Kingdom, watching on Netflix, those series of books are what I read years and years ago, and I was excited to see that actually come out. And they did a pretty good job with it on Netflix, so I like it a lot.
You actually have time to watch that. That's awesome.
I do now. Yeah,
Okay,
I
yeah.
make time. I make time.
All right. My last question is, I know you have children and you don't have to go too much into that, but what is something a kid can teach us about law?
Oh, I think it's a twist on something that I remember from my first year in law school from my contracts professor. To this day, I still repeat this too to people. Um, despite how much of a high level exercise legal reasoning can be, a lot of the answers to legal questions can be, you can probably figure out what the right answer is by just saying in your mind, what would grandma say about this?
Yeah.
Probably do the same with kids. What would kids say about this?
Nice.
And that's probably the right answer. That's probably the right principle.
I would have thought that you would have said negotiation. Kids are pretty good about
Right.
that.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. They
Yeah.
don't give up.
No, they don't. Andy, it's been a quick 20 minutes, but I had to have you on. I had to have you a part of the Drop and Give Me 20 podcast. You're doing really good things out there. And I know we've been at the Military Influencer Conference when we used to conference, there were things that happening like that. And I always appreciated your expertise at those events and what you're doing for our community. For those that are listening, you can go to Fortis Law, FORTISLAW.com. Or you can look for Andy on LinkedIn. His handle is Andrew R. Nelson on LinkedIn, but you can just type in Andy Nelson. You'll find him there. Andy, thank you so much for coming on. And our parting piece of advice as far as the legal aspect goes in entrepreneurship, what would that be?
It would be, I'm not going to talk about trademarks. Early on, insulate your personal assets from liability. I don't care if you have a relatively low risk business. Two ways to do it. One, make sure you have the right commercial insurance. For a lot of you, it's going to be dirt cheap, but it's going to provide a layer of protection for mayhem, right?
That's right.
Commercial. The other side is, you might be a sole proprietor for a while, but as soon as you can afford it, you probably want to organize an entity, be it an LLC, it may be a corporation, maybe something else, but that adds an extra layer of protection, just separation between you, the individual, and your business identity, and keep that potential exposure with the company, not you.
Yeah, huge piece of advice. That's actually what was explained to me, and I ended up forming an S corporation. It was just me at the time. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I did what you're saying and spoke to a formation lawyer, and he was like, and then the other thing that he said was, build it to sell it. And I mean, like, here I am at at their office signing all the formation papers. And I'm like, I don't want to sell this. I'm just forming it. And he's like, build it to sell it. And every time I get to a point where I'm making decisions, like big girl decisions in the business, I always think about that. So thank you for that. I really appreciate you coming on. And I know that we will probably see each other hopefully in the near future when all these things kind of pan out. So thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Lindsay. Appreciate it a bunch.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Drop and Give Me 20. Drop and Give Me 20 is brought to you by Germono Advertising Company, and we would love to invite you into our network of military entrepreneurs on Facebook. Just search for Drop and Give Me 20 and join the Facebook group.